Man, I can't believe it's mid-August already. This is the time of year where I start to get pretty fired up. The bucks are becoming a lot more visible right now. In fact, I came out this morning and the head was knocked off my 3D target here. So anytime that happens, you know we're getting close. Cooler weather, definitely excited for season to get here. It's also the time of year where I start to ramp up the shooting. My quest for a recurve buck is going to continue this year, so I've been spending a lot of time with the Satori in my hand. And I did want to mention too that a few weeks ago, my wife and I flew down to Salt Lake City to meet up with everyone at Hoyt and tour the factory, and that was fascinating. It was so cool to see it in person for the first time. We got to tour the entire factory and just see how much technology and precision, the amount of people that are involved in making the bows what they are. It was a really cool experience and gave me an even greater appreciation for what these are and the quality of them. So that was really cool. But as a follow-up to that, my buddy and I, he helps a lot of archers in general, but we're specifically talking about the Satori side. And I know a lot of you guys have reached out with questions, and we're just seeing an increased interest in at least exploring the traditional archery world, which I love to see. Obviously, my experience has been a little bit slow into it. I've had this recurve for close to 6 years now, but just started jumping in the hunting side. But it's just so much fun to shoot that I would recommend to anybody, even if you're not ready to jump into it as your primary hunting bow. But anyway, it's cool to see the amount of interest. And so we were talking and thinking it would be a good idea to put out more info to help people decide on how to get a Satori as your first recurve. There's a lot of information to consider, and there wasn't a ton of information out there, so we thought what better person to ask and go through that with than the engineer himself, Douglas Denton at Hoyt. I had watched a lot of videos of him previously, but this was my first time getting to interact with him in person, and he was very willing and eager to help provide that information that hopefully will help someone decide on their first Satori. So check it out. As I mentioned in this video too, I'm happy to do a follow-up that goes through more of the actual specs of my setup, my arrow setup, or anything else. So please reach out with questions, and hopefully you enjoy my visit with Douglas.
All right, Douglas. So let's get into this. Again, I appreciate you hopping on. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, but you and I have talked, and the goal of this is really to be able to help guys get into the world of traditional archery. Not from a high level, but let's say they've gotten to the point where the Satori is the route they want to go. Based on the quality, the tunability, the customization of it, whatever it is. This Satori is where these guys want to get into the recurve world. I want to help people out by talking through the different options and things to think about when they go to purchase a Satori, just different considerations, things to keep in mind as far as the performance and what's going to be the best fitting for them. I think back to my journey getting in the Satori world. I think I ordered my first one 6+ years ago. And while I still love it as much as ever, I love shooting it, and a lot of reasons I'd recommend the Satori. There is more I wish I would have known back then when I ordered this first one. And so, I thought no better person to talk to than yourself on kind of laying out some of that information for guys. It's cool to see the amount of interest that I'm getting from people reaching out to me, or I have a good buddy of mine that helps a lot of archers too that's seen the same thing. It's cool to see the amount of interest in traditional archery and specifically the Satori. But I want guys to be able to take that next step and be confident with ordering one. So wanted to talk to you and kind of lay out these options, and definitely appreciate you taking the time to help people out.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out to me, and I'm glad we can finally get together and have this conversation. So,
yeah.
You mentioned you got your Satori like 6 years ago, and my goodness, I didn't feel like I've designed it that long ago.
Yeah. How long has it been then?
Lord, I honestly don't know. I remember, so Fred Eichler and I worked on this project together. Right. And Fred is no longer shooting Hoyt. He's with Bear now. But man, what a great guy. And, a lot of knowledge that I got from him. And he's really the reason we have the 17-inch riser. I mean, he really pushed hard for that. And because he saw that that there was a market for that 17, 19, and 21-inch handle. Although his favorite was always the 19, at least when he was shooting the Satori. But my goodness, it had to be, the 7 years ago, I guess. And I just really didn't realize it was been in the product line that long.
Yeah, it's crazy how fast it flies by. So you mentioned right there the different riser options. I think that's probably a good place to start. Let's talk about just the riser and limb options to start with, because the guy gets on Hoyt website and sees the 17, 19, and 21 riser lengths with short, medium, and long limbs. What does all that mean from a high level standpoint, and what do guys need to think about when they're combining those two together?
Yeah, the first thing that I typically will ask someone that, when they ask me a question, hey, which Satori should I get? I want to find out first what their primary bow hunting is going to be. Is it whitetail bow hunting out of a deer stand? Or is it, whitetail bow hunting out of a blind? Are they out here out in the West like I am here in Salt Lake City, and we hike the mountains and we hunt, typically not in a deer stand. We're doing more spot and stock. So that's really where I dive in first, because that will change typically my recommendation for bow hunters. So I kind of start there, and then so if you're hunting out of a blind and your draw length, let's just say we're dealing with a typical draw length, which is going to be somewhere between 28 and 29 inches. It's very typical for the average build bow hunter out there. And it doesn't matter, female, male, roughly that's where people are living right now. And the 17 and 19-inch handles work great for those draw lengths. And then if you're really hunting out of a blind, I'm pushing you more towards that 17-inch riser, just because of clearance issues that we could have while hunting out of a blind. My personal favorite is the 19. And I prefer the 19-inch because I kind of get the best of both worlds, whether I'm hunting out of a blind or hunting out of a deer stand, that I still have a compact riser and, can have that mobility that I'm looking for as well. So, 17-inch riser with short limbs is going to get you that 58-inch recurve. For most people, when they're getting into the trad world, you see the 58, 60, 62-inch bows, and it's like, well, I'm not even sure what that really means. And so all of that is dictated off the length of limb. So a 17-inch riser with short limbs is going to give you a 58-inch recurve. A 17-inch riser with medium, you add 2 inches to that, you get 60. And then likewise, when you go to the long limb, you get a 62. The longer the limb gets, a little bit smoother it's going to feel as you are pulling back that bow and kind of getting into your anchor point. And that's another big deal too. A lot of times new bow hunters, and I don't know if you experience this yourself, but they go, man, I hunt with a 70 or 80 pound compound bow. Man, I'm going to get, we can order 65 pound limbs with the Satori. I'm just going to go ahead and get that. Yeah. And I would strongly recommend never doing that because it is a way different animal. So our limbs are measured at 28 inches. And so whatever the limb is marked at 28 inches, that's what the poundage you're going to get. Now, here's another little, probably not very well known fact, is we measure that on a 21-inch riser.
Yeah.
So if you go to a 19-inch riser, you kind of got to add, it's a kind of rough rule of thumb is you're going to add 2 pounds. Likewise, when you go to the 17, you're going to add 2 pounds. What that really means is let's do it for easy math, if the limb is marked 40 pounds, it's going to be 40 pounds at 28 inches on a Satori riser. And then it'll be 42 pounds on the 19, and it'll be a 44 pound on the 17.
Right.
So I think that's one thing that people really miss a lot getting into the trad world, is not understanding how the limbs can stack and how that poundage really creeps up on you. And you can actually injure your shoulders pretty quickly if you're not paying attention. Even if you're really strong and healthy, it's those small tendons are in a rotator cuff really that are the ones that kind of get inflamed when you start shooting a recurve bow.
Yeah, I think that's important, and I agree that I think guys overlook the fact that that weight is at a certain draw length. It's not like ordering a compound where your draw weight is your draw weight. If you're pulling back a 27 or something, it's different than if you order 50-pound limbs, but you're only pulling back 27 inches. It's a different draw weight right there. And so, and I didn't really overestimate the draw weight aspect like we talked about, but not knowing the performance difference in the overall bow length was what I didn't know. So I kind of went middle of the road. I got the 19-inch riser with the medium limbs, a 28-inch draw. I'm pulling 52 pounds basically with the 50-pound limb. So I really just went middle of the road because I didn't know, and that was kind of why I did it. So again, just trying to help guys understand what they're getting into with that. So these combinations of 3 different risers and 3 different limb lengths, you can make a bow combination overall length of 58 to 66, correct?
That is right. 66 would be the longest.
Yep. And then weight wise, 35 to 65.
Yep.
On the draw weight. Okay, so that's where guys need to understand that that's at 28 inches, and so you need to adjust one way or another if you are a longer draw length or a shorter draw length than that. And that's gonna, if you're shooting for a certain weight, you have to keep that draw length in mind.
Yeah, and another rule of thumb is for every 1 inch a draw over that 28, add 2 pounds. And likewise, every 1 inch under 28 inches, subtract the 2 pounds. And that's just kind of a rough rule of thumb because it's going to be different on a short limb versus a long limb. So a long limb, you're going to see that 2 pounds. On a medium limb, you're going to see a little bit more. And on the short, it's pushing really more like 2.5 pounds. So it's something to be aware of as well. That the other thing with the Satori, we ship these Satoris with the limb boat. We refer to them, or I refer to them as a tiller boat.
Yeah.
But the tiller boat boat is screwed all the way into the riser. Now, that's going to give you the maximum bow weight for your limbs. And how we actually measure those is really it's backed out 2.5 turns. So if you used to take your Satori, back it out 2.5 turns, and then measure it at 28 inches, that's going to give you basically what the limb is marked.
Okay.
So that's another thing that some people go, hey, my limbs are heavy. And yes, they are with how the bow is set up, but no, they won't be if we get it set up properly for them.
How much poundage adjustment is there in that then with those tiller bolts?
So you can take, with the dovetail block that we have in the Satori, I wouldn't go over 4.5 turns, meaning, you screw the limb boat into the bow and then back it out full, 4.5 turns. If you go past that, the dovetail itself on the limb can kind of bind a little bit in there. So that's a good rule of thumb. 4.5 pound or 4.5 turns would be the max that I would go on the Satori.
Okay. All right. So kind of to bring that together, let's say there's a guy, let's pick a very, very common, let's say 29-inch draw length, and he wants 50 pounds at 29 inches. What would be the exact combination that you would recommend there as far as the riser and the limbs?
So I'd probably end up pushing them towards that 19 inch. So let's just start with it's a whitetail bow hunter.
Whitetail, yeah.
Whitetail bow hunter hunting out of this deer stand, call it 90+% of the time. I'd push him towards that 19-inch riser, a medium limb, and I'd tell him to get the 45-pound limb, because 45 pounds, because you have that adjustability in the limb boats, and then you're already pulling past the 28 inches to 29. So
right.
If you went with the 50-pound limb, it's going to definitely be well over 50. It's probably going to be pushing more like that 55-pound plus. So the 45-pound limb would be the way to go. You could actually get away with a 40-pound limb that it's going to push you more towards that 47, 48 pounds at your full draw. So
Yeah. So if a guy knows his hunting situation, like you were saying, if is he hunting out of blinds, tree stands, or is he going to be hunting? I mean, even myself, I'm primarily a whitetail guy, but I do find myself when I'm hunting with the recurve, I tend to hunt from the ground a lot more, even in whitetail country, and instead of getting in a confined space, and just trying to create easier shots for myself. It's easier being at eye level with the deer. So if a guy understands kind of what his hunting situation is going to be, and everything else considered equal, there, are you most of the time going to get better performance and feel out of the longer bow setup, the overall longer length, and as a general rule of thumb?
So let's make sure we're on the same page when we talk about performance. Are we talking about how fast the arrow goes?
Not necessarily speed, I would say more performance feel wise.
Okay, so then if someone's looking for the call it a smoother feel and a limb that doesn't feel like it just instantly stacks on you, a longer limb is always going to be better. It's going to give you a really good, consistent, smooth draw. It's not going to feel like it stacks, you'll start pulling, and then, 4 or 5 inches into the draw, it feels like you're pulling against a wall, and you just can't move it very much, So the longer the limb, for sure, the smoother the feel of that bow is going to be. So again, like your first bow was the 19-inch Satori, putting a long limb on that versus a medium limb, you're going to feel a huge difference in how that limb feels as you're coming into anchor. A lot of people will talk about string angle between a short, medium, and long limb.
Right.
I feel on the Satoris, it is so minute. We're talking about the string angle, and with how most people are shooting 3 fingers under, very few, I think, in the Satori world are shooting as a split finger. It doesn't become a factor, in my opinion, from the archers that I've been able to work with and setting up bows. When you get into the Olympic world, a little bit different, but in the hunting world, like what we're talking about, I would not be concerned with string angle on any level with any of the setups. Even going from a 17-inch to a 21-inch, you're going to adapt super quick to that string angle, and it's not going to be a big difference to you. But performance and feel wise, man, way different. On the longer limb is going to be a really smooth, consistent pull. It's probably going to end up being a little bit quieter because of you have the limbs are not necessarily storing the same amount of energy. So as that energy gets pushed into that arrow, it's definitely going to be quieter than a shorter setup that is really snappy. And it's almost like a kind of it's not a whip, but man, if you look at it in high-speed video, those limbs and snap on the shorter bows versus a little bit longer Satori, it's way different.
Yeah. So I guess the other part of that equation, and your first question, speed-wise, what is the difference there, or what would a person be giving up going from a medium length to a longer length?
Yeah, so when we're just talking about staying within, call it the same series of handle, meaning a 19-inch or 17 or 21, you're not going to be giving up a whole lot. So let's just say we're going to stick with the same arrow, and we're going to put in and we're going to shoot exactly the same poundage. So we're going to compare apples to apples, same arrow, same string material, same bow weight, same draw length. The only difference is the limb length. You're honestly probably giving up 2 to 3 feet per second.
Okay.
At the most.
Okay. With regards to limbs, obviously most guys are going to be getting the Satori limbs. Do you ever have any guys putting the axial limbs on the Satoris for hunting purposes? Or
absolutely, we do. Matter of fact, years ago we would offer our high-end limb in that hunting category. Now, what we don't do with our high-end limbs is offer them above 50 pounds.
Okay.
And the reason is all the engineering for our Olympic grade limbs are done at that 50-pound range, and we don't engineer those to be 55 and 65 pounds.
Right.
So it is kind of maxed out at that 50-pound which covers 90+% of the bow hunters out there in the trad world. You're going to pick up speed is the first and foremost, like the Axia limb that we have right now with the engineered carbon skins that we have, and you have a foam version or a resin core version that we offer, which is our wooden core, but it is a proprietary material that's made specifically for Hoyt.
Yeah.
And so we put a lot of engineering into that core material. But so we have the two different ones. You're going to get speed is the first and foremost, and it's going to have a much different feel on the draw force curve. As you're drawing back that bow. If you're looking for a little bit smoother pull and faster setup, it really will be the Axia foam limb, and they will marry up perfectly with the Satoris because the Axia foam is actually just a matte black limb, so it's all the carbon exposed, and we just have our Hoyt graphic on it. Now, if you go with the wooden core, the resin core limb, we do have white that's on that limb, and so you'll need to rattle can that a little bit and get it to where it's suitable for hunting. Unfortunately, right now we don't offer those limbs to be able to in camo. And I'm not sure if you can if we would do a custom bow for that, because we most certainly could. I'll be honest, I don't know if we offer that because we stopped offering those higher end limbs in that product category, a couple of years back.
Okay. Good to know. With follow-up question on the Axia limbs, is there a difference noise-wise compared to the stock limbs, or does it depend on the material, the foam or the resin?
There is so much that goes into noise with a recurve bow, from the weight of the arrow to the string material to the finger tab we're using. I like to give this example, and it's when it comes to noise for a recurve bow. So this has been a number of years ago, and I was in the Netherlands doing a seminar for our recurve product. And there's this gentleman that was shooting one of our Olympic recurves, and I swear it sounded like he was taking a baseball bat and hitting a leather couch. It was whack, whack, and I was like, oh my God, this bow is set up so bad. And I went through that bow with a fine-tooth comb, and I couldn't find anything wrong with it. And finally, there was like 70 some people around at that point, and I'm messing with this bow, and they're like, well, what's Douglas going to do with this bow? It's obviously something's wrong. And out of frustration, I was like, can I shoot it? And he's like, sure. So I took my finger tab, I shot his arrow, so didn't move the clicker or anything, and it was whisper quiet.
Yeah.
And people were just dumbfounded. And I was dumbfounded as well. I was like, my goodness. So I did it multiple times, and I shot it, and then I'd hand it back to him. He would shoot it, whack. And finally I was like, it's you, buddy. So what I mean by that is the release is so critical with a recurve that what he was doing was basically putting so much oscillation back into the string, and that oscillation gets pushed into the arrow, gets pushed into the limbs, and the limbs start to really move a lot if we used to see it under high speed, and it just creates a lot of noise. So there's some setups that would be super quiet for you that would be loud for me, and vice versa. So much goes into it. And I would recommend when people have a Satori and they want it and they're trying to get it quieter, putting Mow skin in the pockets. This is something that Fred Eichler would do. He would put Mow skin underneath the tiller boat. He would put Mow skin on the riser where the limb touches the riser. Of course, he would put the Mow skin where the string touches the limb as well. So trying to quiet it down as much as possible. But that's something that he found that would work great for him in his setup and his release style. So it's something that people really need to play with when setting up and trying to get the highest performance out of their Satori.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. String wise, do you guys offer the ability to customize string colors? I was fortunate to get down there and tour the whole factory a couple of weeks ago, and including the string building area, and it was fascinating. But on the recurve side, do you guys have that capability to customize that right now, or not yet?
So unfortunately, we don't. So we don't make our Flemish strings in-house. We have a company that kind of specializes in Flemish strings, make those for us. The string machines that you saw while visiting Hoyt, all of those were engineered by our manufacturing engineers, designed and built specifically here for Hoyt. We do make our endless loop, recurve strings, but we also only offer those in one color and one string material. So unfortunately, right now, we don't have a lot of options when it comes to the Flemish strings or different color strings for our Satoris.
Yeah, no, good to know. Just thinking of things that guys are definitely asking as they're going to order. Is there anything? I think we've covered a lot of the main things I wanted to get information out there on. Anything else for a guy that's looking to order his first Satori that you would want to make sure he or she keeps in mind, as they go through that process the first time?
Yeah, for sure. So when ordering your first Satori, and say you're an avid bow hunter, and you have your bow set up on your compound bow set up at a certain draw length, whatever that draw length is, keep in mind that you're probably going to end up having technically a shorter draw length on a Satori than what you do on a compound. A lot of times people shooting compounds can with the release aids and how they're setting up and how they anchor, they end up most of the time having a little bit longer draw length on a compound than what you will with a recurve. And it feels comfortable to them. But going to a traditional recurve, you'll definitely want to think about at least probably a quarter to a half inch shorter would be my guess. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, mine is half an inch.
Yeah.
28.5 on compound and 28 on the Satori.
Yeah. So I definitely keep that in mind, because that's going to change the limb you're going to order and the feel of that bow as well. So.
Right. And you think, that 45 for a lot of the average guys, that are pulling, let's say 70 pounds on a compound, somewhere in that 45 to 50 range is if they're not able to go out and shoot one or whatever, or experiment with different kinds, that's a pretty good starting point, that 45 to 50.
Oh, 100%. If you think about it, the 45-pound lamb with the adjustment boats that we have on the Satoris, you're going to get 50 pounds probably at most draw lengths anyway. And 50 pounds fling in a trad setup, it's going to zip right through any whitetail deer out there. Call it, if you're capable of shooting one out 40 yards plus, it's going to still zip through it. So
yeah. Well, awesome, Douglas. I appreciate it again. I like I said, I wanted to kind of keep this focused to guys ordering Satori. Potentially we could do a follow-up and provide more information once the guys get it and how to set it up and all that stuff. But I know this is all information I wish I knew a few years back, and hopefully it'll help some guys out there as they look into ordering one. So definitely appreciate the time, and would love to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me.